welcome to my channel. Today I was making a Blythe doll romper. So I started with that pattern I was just showing you that I made myself. I based it off of a previous pattern that I had when I was making my first sewing, which was a Blythe doll dress. And I thought I would do a quick run through of how I sew these patterns so that if anyone else is interested in making Blythe doll clothes, they can see how it can be done fairly easily, especially if you're like me and you don't have a lot of sewing experience. So right now it's kind of cut off, but I was tracing the pattern on some gray fabric. The fabric I use is actually just old clothes that I have that I feel like aren't good enough to donate, and I don't want to just throw them away. So all of my designs are usually made from just old clothes of mine. And I just finished marking it on some old pair of leggings is what I was using. There I show you the outline of what it kind of should look like after you're done drawing the pattern. And then I'm just taking some scissors and cutting out the design so far. Okay, so now that I finished cutting it out for the most part and doing a close-up so you can see I cut out the hole for where the neck will go, I thought it was a bit easier to kind of cut out the bigger fabric first, and then I can kind of get a better grip on it as I cut out the hole for the head. So that's what your pattern should look like once you're done. Here I'm marking where her arms will be so that when I sew it, I give enough space for her arms to actually fit. So if you notice, I'm a couple of centimeters under where her arm is because you don't want to get it too close to her arm or her hand won't actually go through. And if you know about Blythe dolls, then you know you also can change their hands, and you want to make sure there's enough space for any type of hand your doll might be wearing. So here I'm going in and actually sewing the design shut. And remember to keep it with the marker side out so that when you invert it to be inside out, which will actually be right way around, you don't see any of the marker marks you made on the fabric. And it will also hide the stitchings. So it will just make the outfit look a little bit smoother when you do it that way. And I didn't really like the way I sewed it. It was a different outfit. I did a different type of loop, but I still think it turns out pretty well. I mean, you can be the judge of that when you see the final product, but I wanted to show this as well and do it by hand because I know not everybody has a sewing machine. And a lot of these patterns, I try sewing them first by hand just because that's easier for me, and it's a good way to test out, like, does this pattern actually work or do I need to make changes, and I don't want to go to my sewing machine and like mess anything up or use up the nice thread and then it ends up actually not fitting the Blythe doll. So I always hand sew things first, just so I can have like a prototype basically of any outfit, and I can kind of see what works, what didn't before I make like a final version. And kind of same with the fabric I use. I don't mind using old clothes as fabric, but I was actually created the design thinking it was going to be for a bathing suit, and I didn't want to use the bathing suit fabric I had, and then it ends up not turning out well because I have an old bathing suit that I was going to cut up, but I didn't. I only have so much of that since I am just using an old bathing suit that I own. I don't own a million bathing suits that I can just use and try all the time. So I kind of wanted to make sure that this pattern would actually work in the way that it is right now. And I'm glad I did because there were some changes I would want to make, and you'll see that towards the end, and I'll point it out, but you'll probably notice it on your own. So I do think if you do have leftover fabric or old clothes, it can be a good idea to kind of make a prototype of any of your outfits first, especially if you want to use newer fabric and you're spending money on this. And it might be upsetting if you make it and it doesn't actually fit your doll or you mess up. And like I said before, hand sewing is also a good way if you don't own a sewing machine. They also have fabric glue, which can also be useful when making doll clothes without some sewing materials. But I wanted to have like a beginner friendly video, and the way I learned to sew was first by hand. And I think there's a lot of things on a sewing machine that can be confusing that I don't even know how to use. Like I said, I'm a beginner. So I wanted to make sure people knew making doll clothes is accessible. You don't need a bunch of fancy fabric or sewing machines or materials. You can kind of use what you probably already have at home. And also, the sewing kit I'm using was a mini sewing kit that was like $5 on Amazon or something like that. So even if you're like, I don't own anything, you can probably still find something within your price range. And again, like you could just buy some fabric glue, your old clothes, you probably own a pair of scissors, and do it that way. I would just be careful that, if sewing is going to look different than using fabric glue. So keep that in mind if you do prefer to go that method, which of course will be quicker. So you would skip this if you were using glue and just glue the parts shut that you want to be shut. But if you are hand sewing, it would go like this. And I'll just speed it up now because I think you get the idea. Okay, so now that I cut off the string, I'm trying to show you how tight the stitching is. I always like to test this to see how easy it can actually pull apart. Like I said, I'm a beginner sewer, so sometimes I don't always do the tightest stitches or might mess up actually sealing that stitch at the end. So I'm just making sure I can't actually just pull it apart with my bare hands. And here I just noticed some loose string, so I'm trying to cut that off so it's not just hanging off. And then again, testing and making sure that I didn't cut something that was actually holding it together. So I found it was kind of tearing apart, so I wanted to restitch this area. And I'm leaving this in because I think it's a good sign to show people are going to mess up, especially in the beginning when you're trying something new. So just because a new hobby may be hard to try, or other people may seem like they already have it like down pat and you're the only one messing up or don't know what you're doing, like it's normal, it's common, and sometimes you have to resew some things or try again. So don't be discouraged if you mess up. It's finished resewing it, and now again I'm testing, is it going to rip apart? It seems pretty good. Of course, again, if you use a sewing machine, you're going to have a tighter stitch and this won't be a problem. But I wanted to try it out when hand sewing it, so when I put the doll in the clothes, it doesn't instantly start splitting at the seams or something. So now I'm turning it the right way around. If you remember at the beginning, I said to make sure that it's marker side while you're sewing it. So now you can't see any of those purple marker marks. And I forgot to mention I used an expo marker because I think that will wash out if you ever wash the clothes versus if you're using like a permanent marker or Sharpie or something. And of course to make fabric markers, but I don't own one. And this is supposed to be a very like accessible, friendly sewing tutorial, and I know everybody doesn't own those type of things, just like I don't. So expo markers can work. Of course, just like a pencil or something could have also worked, but I wanted to make sure it was showing up clearly. So here I am actually trying to put it on the doll, and I was kind of struggling, but you'll get a clearer shot in a sec. This is the final look. It was kind of hard to film and hold her, so it looks very odd, but there you can see it actually does fit the doll. So I hope this tutorial was helpful. Please leave any questions or recommendations in the comments, and thank you so much for watching. Bye!